All right, guys. I am going to be starting a watercolor here in my watercolor journal. And I just want to go over and review some of the basic techniques for when getting started. Now, you should have already seen a video that I shared with you about how to set up our palette and how little the amount of paint that we need to put down there. Remember, we could always go back and add more, but you really can't put this paint back in the tube. Now, I set my palette up and then I allowed my paint to dry overnight. And so the beautiful thing about watercolor again is that you don't have to clean the palette once the paint dries. It's still usable. In fact, I prefer it once it's dried. So you might have those watercolor cakes. Essentially, that's just a lot of already dried watercolor. Or if you have it in the tubes, you're going to set it up like this. Now, I have already set up a little pool of water with some green and some blue right here. Now, the key to watercolor again is you want to make it very fluid. You want very little pigment and lots of water. The beauty of watercolor is how translucent and how transparent your colors are. Another thing is you rarely want to use color directly from the tube. You always want to enrich your colors. These colors are meant to be mixed. There's two ways with watercolor. You can put a wash down and then you can go back later with a different wash on top of it with a different color, or you can change the pool of color right now. So I'm going to start off by doing that at first. So I have my little pool of blue. I'm going to want to change the blue a little bit. I want to neutralize it. So to neutralize a color, you want to add its complement. So I'm going to, now I also have my big bucket of clean water with me. That's right like this. You can see I use it quite a bit. This is but it's clean water in there, even though the bucket's a little dirty. All right, so I have my bucket of clean water. I have my clean brush. I have my palette, my painting surface, and my painting on my paper. So I'm going to get started. So I'm going to alter this blue a little bit. Right, I'm going to take a little bit of its complement, which is orange. I'm going to make sure my brush is clean. Paper towel is good too. You want to have paper towel. All right, I have a clean brush. And I'm going to put a little bit of orange onto my paintbrush. Now I want to bring less orange into the blue. I want it still to be predominantly blue, but I want to just have a hint of orange into it. All right, now remember my palette is set up so it does not have white on it. So if I want something to be white, I have to plan on not painting there. Okay, so I think I want to bring just a little bit more orange in there. I cleaned my brush. I'm going to bring a little bit more orange in there, and I've neutralized my blue. Now I am going to start applying this to my sky. Now, one of the techniques is called painting with the drip. So as I'm painting this onto my sky, I want to move the drip along. I don't really want to brush very hard on the paper. It's rather you see this little drip, and you'll see this on your own paper, and I just want to push that drip along. Now you can see how faint this sky is right now. It's very light. And I want that. I like that. I want to make sure that I don't get dark fast. The beautiful thing about watercolor is to layer your watercolors and let the darkness build. You don't want to get dark right away. Sometimes you're going to want to leave some things extremely light and transparent, and some things are going to be more opaque. And that's going to create a push and pull effect in your painting. Now, another one of my painting tips is I always work from back to front. So I start on sky. I want to fill the sky in. I want to work the background. Now I have some clouds here, and that's where I don't want to paint. So the good thing about having this big pool of paint like this is that I'm getting a nice even coat, a nice even layer, and I want to work with a lot of layers. Now, if I go back later on and I paint additionally on top of this color, it's going to get darker. I have some, it's hard to see because I draw very lightly when I'm doing my sketch, especially with watercolor, because graphite and watercolor are not particularly friends. They're not good friends. So you want to try not to use too much pencil. You definitely don't want to shade. Now, I just got a little color on top of a branch that I didn't want to paint on. That's not a big deal, but I could always take a dry brush and I could soak the paint up while it's still wet, or you could take a paper towel and you can kind of wipe it away. All right. So I'm looking to see my sketch. I want to get my sky color back underneath my clouds as well. Now, even though this is a very small painting, because I'm going to be layering so many colors, it's going to take me a while. You cannot rush it. I'm telling you, it's quite obvious when you rush a painting. You want to work slowly and work in layers. And there's some types of paint where you can go fast. Watercolor is not really that type of paint. Watercolor is about patience, and it's about working in layers, building your colors, working very, very lightly at first. All right. Now you'll see when the end result is done and I have my painting completed, you'll see that I'll definitely get a lot more contrast in my painting. And not everything will be this light, but some things will be. So that's my first layer in the sky pretty much. I just want to get underneath and around this tree. Being careful not to paint in areas that I want to leave empty. All right, that's my sky. That's the first layer of my sky that's done. Now I'm going to skip. I don't want to do the trees right now because I want to allow the sky to dry. If I go and I try to paint these little trees that are off in the distance, it's going to bleed into my sky. So I want to avoid that. So you want to know when to work certain areas and when not to. So there's a little safe zone here. So if I go and I work on the water of the ocean, it won't bleed into the sky. So I'm going to now change the color that I have, and I'm going to take my palette and I'm going to make a pool of color over here and allow me to just put, I have a little eyedropper that I use, and I just put a couple of drops of water. You can use whatever you want. You want to take the cap of a bottle of water. Um, that's kind of the way I do it. So dipping back into my blue, I want to make an ocean color here. So I'm going to take that blue and I'm going to add a hint of green to it. But again, I don't want it to be too strong, but you'll see the difference between this blue and the sky blue. And I want to keep enough space on my palette so that they don't touch each other right now. All right. And I am going to start putting my ocean color down. Now, again, the more that I layer these colors, the more they're going to vary. Now, I'm going to want to leave some white showing because that's going to be like if there's waves or if I have some current in the ocean, I'm going to want to leave the white. You don't want to go back in and paint with white later on. Remember, it's a good idea to plan where you're going to have the white. You want to leave the white of the paper. All right, so I'm leaving some empty space as I fill in my water. Now I could choose later on to go back and cover up some of those spaces. A lot of watercolor is about planning. So I got to look, I got some water that's going to peek through this tree here, leaving my white. And I'm going to glaze some other colors definitely into my water and into all of the areas of my painting. And glazing is just putting one transparent color on top of another transparent color. I like to explain it as like, think of it as colored saran wrap. If you took a piece of yellow colored saran wrap, that's plastic wrap, and you put a red piece of plastic wrap on top of it, it's going to look orange. That's essentially what I think of watercolor. Think of it as like transparent layers that we want to put on top of each other. So you can see I'm putting my water in there, and I'll take a really good picture of this when it's finished, and I'll share it onto our Google Classroom. All right, I think I'm going to stop this video here for now, and then I'll bring you back when I have a little more progress made, and I'll talk about what I did. and what I'm going to do in order to finish it.